Economist magazine's Buttonwood Gathering taking place this week in New York. It brings together business, finance, and government leaders on issues such as government debt and regulatory changes. One panel today dealt with China's future in global finance. Our next guest was one of the speakers, noted short seller Jim Chanos, founder and managing partner of the $6 billion hedge fund Kynikos Associates. Jim, great to have you back with Matt and me. I want to talk about China, but, you know, we just talked with Ed Lazier for a while talking about how to grow our way out of the deficit, and his point was you've really got to cut back on spending, reduce the amount of government spending. I'd love for you to weigh in on this. I mean, what do you think needs to be done in terms of our government deficit?
Well, I mean, there's deficit and then there's the real deficit. I mean, the fact of the matter is that if America kept its books like every corporation, the deficit wouldn't be 1.3 trillion, it'd be about 5 trillion a year. So the problem is healthcare costs. That's what's going to kill us. It's hitting states and municipalities now. It's going to be hitting the federal government probably in 10 to 15 years. I mean, the numbers are what they are. Everybody knows it. We're going to see it with the Deficit Reduction Commission. We can't grow our way out of that problem. We've got to attack entitlements and healthcare costs. Whether we have the political will to do it, we'll see.
Hey, Jim, why is it that the smartest people in the world disagree on what this healthcare reform is going to do? We just had Ed Lazier on. He said it's going to boost healthcare costs. The president, of whom you are a big supporter, says it's going to cut healthcare costs. I mean, what are we actually looking at here?
Well, I'll tell you what we did, because we were short the healthcare stocks going into last fall until we read the bill. We covered our shorts. So that should tell you what we think. I think that's going to be very, very tough to keep costs down under the current bill. The current bill really was to expand coverage and change things like pre-existing conditions. It did not get to the root of the problem, which is spiraling costs. I think they felt that subsequent Congresses and administrations might have to tackle that, but based on the politics we're seeing right now, I think that's questionable at best.
All right, so let's get to China.
Hey, we do want to talk about China with you, Jim. You were just on a panel that's kind of looking at China's future in global finance. I mean, what is it in your view? I mean, has things, you know, dramatically and definitively shifted from the developed nations, the U.S. and other developed nations, to China at this point, or not quite yet when it comes to global finance?
Well, I mean, China is the 800-pound panda in the room, so to speak. I mean, it is driving everything. It's driving global growth. It is most of the global growth right now. It is certainly stoking demand for all kinds of commodities, which is helping economies like Australia and Brazil and Canada. And it's really the engine upon which, you know, much of the world is pegging its hopes for the 21st century. My only concern is that right now it happens to be really, really devoted toward real estate development. And I think we've seen what problems that can lead to in the West. I don't think China avoids it.
Well, if China doesn't avoid it, Jim, then what are the implications? Do we feel the pain like we've seen with what happened here in the United States and the housing bubble? Do we get the same kind of impact from a China housing bubble?
I think interestingly enough, the U.S. economy feels the pain of a China property bubble bursting least of all. I think, again, the region will feel it more. I think certain economies like Brazil and Australia will feel it more. But interestingly, we'll probably feel it the least of any of the developing economies.
Even though you think it'll have a negative effect on their currency?
Well, I do think it'll have a negative effect. Interestingly enough, if you look at the Chinese yuan on a trade-weighted basis right now, it's actually been declining because it's pegged to the dollar. And so the Europeans are beginning to get a little upset now with the Chinese. They're beginning to weigh in on the currency issue. But the currency issue, as I indicated today at this gathering, is not meaningful to China. It is net exports are still only about 5% of their GDP. It is the property bubble that consumes that country.